Story number 1. If trees are broken at 15 feet high, leave that trail. Nature has rules. Trees break in storms at predictable heights. Wind stress causes fractures at 6 to 8 feet, where leverage is strongest. Animals mark territory by rubbing or clawing bark at reachable heights. Bears stand 7 feet maximum. Elk may be 8. Lightning strikes from above, leaving scorch patterns that taper downward. But when you find trees broken clean at 15 feet, snapped like toothpicks with the trunks thrown 30 yards, you're not looking at weather or wildlife. You're looking at something with impossible strength and worse, impossible rage. My name is Vincent Eaglehart, and I'm a trail maintenance supervisor for North Cascades National Park in Washington. My grandfather was Skagit, and he taught me to read the forest language. What's natural, what's territorial, what's warning. When trees break high, he'd say, it's not marking territory, it's expressing fury. And whatever's that angry doesn't stop at trees. It just starts there. July 2024, peak summer season. I was inspecting the Thunder Creek Trail. Coordinates 48.6734 degrees north, 121.0521 degrees west. Following reports of unusual trail damage from hikers. The description was vague. Trees blocking path. Major storm damage. But when I reached mile marker 4.2, I understood why they couldn't describe it properly. 8 mature Douglas firs, each 3 feet in diameter, broken at exactly 15 feet high. Not cut, broken. The trunks showed massive splintering, with fibers torn apart by brute force. And the broken tops weren't where they should have fallen. They were thrown, scattered in a rough circle around the breakage points, some landing 40 yards away. A 3-ton tree trunk, thrown 40 yards. I keep my radio. Base, this is Eaglehart. I'm at the reported damage site on Thunder Creek. This isn't storm damage. I'm seeing deliberate destruction. Trees broken at unnatural heights with trunks display significant distances. Requesting supervisor assessment. Copy. What do you mean unnatural heights? 15 feet. 8 trees. All snapped at the same height. Clean breaks showing force application, not wind stress. Long pause. Stand by. While I waited, I examined the break patterns more closely. The splintering radiated from a central point on each trunk where something had grabbed and twisted. I could see the spiral fracture pattern. And at that central grab point on each tree, I found impressions in the wood. Handprints, but wrong. Each print showed 4 fingers and a thumb, but the fingers were 7 inches long. The thumb opposed at the wrong angle. And the grip strength required to leave those impressions in Douglas fir heartwood was beyond anything human or ape. My radio crackled. Eaglehart, Chief Moreno here. Describe the handprints. How did he know about the handprints? I hadn't mentioned them yet. 4 fingers, thumb, each finger approximately 7 inches. Impression suggests grip force sufficient to compress wood fibers permanently. Thumb opposition suggests non-human anatomy. Another pause. GPS your exact location and return to base immediately. Do not proceed further on Thunder Creek Trail. Mark this section as closed for avalanche debris. Chief, we're in July. There's no snow. That's the official reason, Vincent. The real reason is those handprints match a pattern we've been tracking for 6 years. Same entity, same rage markers, same 15-foot break height. And 3 people who encountered it directly haven't come back the same. I marked the GPS coordinates. Started my return hike. That's when I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd experienced. Imagine a cougar scream mixed with gorilla's roar, but amplified 10 times and structured like language. Syllables. Meaning. Raw fury translated into vocalization that made my chest vibrate from 200 yards away. The sound came from deeper up the trail, from the direction I'd been heading, and it was followed by the unmistakable crack of another tree breaking high. Then another, rapid succession. Whatever was up there was destroying the forest in a systematic rage. I didn't run. Running triggers chase response and predators. I walked fast, deliberately, toward the trailhead. Behind me, the sounds continued. Trees breaking. That impossible roar scream. And then footsteps. Heavy, rhythmic, getting closer. I risked a glance back. Saw movement through the trees, 50 yards out. Something massive moving between trunks. Bipedal, maybe 9 feet tall, covered in dark reddish-brown hair. Arms too long, reaching nearly to the ground. And it was pacing me, matching my speed. Not closing distance, but not falling behind. Following. Base. I have visual contact with unknown bipedal entity. Approximately 9 feet tall, dark reddish-brown hair. Following my position on Thunder Creek Trail. Maintaining 50-yard distance. Do not engage. Do not make eye contact. Continue to trailhead at steady pace. Backup is being mobilized. The thing followed me for 2 miles. Never closer than 40 yards. Never try and cut me off or attack. Just following, occasionally reaching up to snap a branch at 15 feet. Demonstrating. Reminding me what it could do. What it had chosen not to do to me. When I reached the trailhead, it stopped at the forest edge. Stood there for a full minute, staring at me with eyes that showed too much intelligence. Then it raised both arms above its head and brought them down on a cedar sapling, snapping it at exactly 15 feet, despite the sapling only being 12 feet tall. It had to reach down to break it at that height. It was making a point. Then it vocalized again, that structured roar scream. But this time I caught words. Salish language. My grandfather's words. This is my anger. This is my warning. This forest remembers what you took. It turned and walked back into the forest with strides so long I lost sight of it in seconds. Chief Moreno met me with a team. We filed reports, closed the trail officially for unstable terrain hazard, and he showed me the file. The real file. The one only senior staff see. North Cascades has been tracking this entity since 2018. 15 separate incidents of high break tree damage. Each incident preceded by disappearances or near encounters. The pattern. Hikers report feeling watched, hearing vocalizations, finding massive tracks. Then trees start breaking at 15 feet. The entity marking territory, expressing rage, warning people away. But it's not random rage. The breaks always happen in specific locations. Areas where logging occurred in the 1950s. Clear cuts that destroyed old-growth forest. The entity isn't angry about current hiking. It's angry about historical destruction. And it expresses that anger by breaking trees at heights loggers can't reach, demonstrating power that modern machinery can't match. 3 hikers who encountered it directly in past years all reported the same experience I had. Being followed but not attacked, being shown demonstrations of strength, being escorted to forest edges and released. But all 3 developed severe psychological issues afterward. Night terrors, paranoia, compulsive need to return to the encounter sites. 1 is in psychiatric care. 1 disappeared 2 years ago after hiking Thunder Creek alone, despite warnings. 1 committed suicide, leaving a note. It's still in my head. The anger, the grief. I can feel what the forest lost. Here's what haunts me. I understood it when it vocalized in Salish, when it demonstrated by breaking trees at impossible heights. I felt what it was expressing. Rage at destruction, grief at loss, fury that spans decades. The forest does remember what we took, and something in that forest embodies that memory. We keep finding new break sites, always 15 feet, always in former logging areas. The entity is still there, still angry, still marking the forest with demonstrations of power that remind us what existed before we cut it down. If you hike North Cascades and you find trees broken at 15 feet high, leave that trail immediately. Not because the entity attacks. It doesn't, usually, but because you're in the presence of grief and rage that's been building for 70 years. And witnessing that kind of emotion changes you, gets into your head, makes you understand losses you never experienced personally. The 3 hikers who encountered it weren't attacked. They were infected with memory, with grief, with rage that wasn't theirs but became theirs through proximity to something that embodies pure, impossible fury. Nothing natural has that kind of strength, but something in those mountains has that kind of rage, and it's been expressing that rage through demonstrations we can't ignore. Trees broken where they shouldn't break, thrown distances they shouldn't travel, marked with handprints that prove intelligence and planning. The high breaks aren't random. They're communication. I can reach higher than you ever could. I can destroy what you can't protect. And I've been here longer than your machinery, longer than your trails, longer than your memory. Leave that trail, because the entity doesn't need to attack to damage you. Just being near that much concentrated grief and fury is enough to change how your brain works, to make you remember losses the forest suffered, to make you feel rage at destruction you never witnessed. Trees broken at 15 feet high mean you're in the territory of something that's been angry for decades. And anger that old, that pure, that focused doesn't need violence to harm you. It just needs you to understand what was lost. And understanding that loss breaks something in humans that can't be repaired. Story number 2. Don't camp at elevation above 9,000 feet in the Rockies alone. Thin air does things to your brain. Above 9,000 feet, oxygen levels drop enough to cause mild hypoxia. Judgment gets impaired. Reaction time slow. Some people experience altitude sickness, nausea, headaches, confusion. It's why mountaineers acclimatize gradually, why rangers recommend ascending slowly. But thin air isn't the only reason we tell people not to camp alone above 9,000 feet. It's not even the main reason. The real reason is that at that elevation, you're in the territory of something that hunts specifically at night, specifically targets solo campers, and uses the thin air as cover. Rangers will always blame altitude sickness for what happens, because the alternative is admitting we share these mountains with something we can't explain. My name is Maria Thundercloud, and I'm a backcountry ranger for Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. My grandfather was Arapaho, and he taught me about the Nunup, the owl beings who live in high places and take people who camp alone. They wait for solitude, he'd say. 2 people, they watch but don't approach. 1 person, especially a high elevation where minds are already confused, that's when they come down. August 2024. I was doing a compliance check on high elevation campsites, making sure solo campers knew the risks and had proper permits. At 11,200 feet on Long's Peak Trail, coordinates 40.2547 degrees north, 105.6154 degrees west, I found Lucas Brennan, 34, from Denver. Experienced climber, all the right gear, planning to summit Long's Peak the next morning. Mr. Brennan, you're camping solo above 9,000 feet. Are you aware of park recommendations for buddy system at this elevation? He smiled. I've climbed Rainier solo, Hood solo, Whitney solo. I know the altitude risks. I'm acclimatized, hydrated, and I got oxygen if I need it. The recommendation isn't just about altitude sickness. I said carefully, we've had incidents. Solo campers at high elevation experiencing unusual problems. Disorientation beyond normal hypoxia. It's safer to have a partner. Unusual problems? He was curious now. Like what? I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't say that 6 solo campers above 9,000 feet in the past 3 years have been found in their tents, alive but catatonic, showing no injury but also no response to stimulus. Couldn't mention that 2 had later described being visited during the night by tall figures that shouldn't exist at this elevation. Couldn't explain that rangers refuse to work solo up here specifically because something hunts alone at night. Just ranger protocol. Sir, stay safe. I logged his campsite, noted his solo status, and continued my patrol. That night, I camped at 9,800 feet with my partner Jake. Standard procedure, never alone above 9,000. We set up camp, prepared dinner, settled in. The air was thin, stars impossibly bright at this elevation. Beautiful, isolating. At 11,200 feet, Lucas Brennan was even more isolated. At 0230 hours, my radio crackled. Not a transmission, interference. The kind that suggests something's disrupting the signal. I listened. Through the static, I could hear breathing, slow, deliberate, not human rhythm. And behind it, a sound like wings, large wings. Jake was already awake. You hearing that? Yeah, radio interference, and the breathing stopped. The static cleared, and we heard Lucas Brennan screaming, distorted by distance and radio artifacts, but definitely screaming. Then silence. Then the interference returned, heavier, like something was actively blocking our communications. We mobilized immediately, grabbed gear, headlamps, started the climb toward Lucas's campsite at 11,200 feet. 90 minutes of hard hiking in darkness, thin air making every step harder. We found his camp at 0410 hours. Tent intact, sleeping bag empty, all his gear present except his boots. And on the tent fabric, visible in our headlamp beams, were marks, long scratches in sets of 3. Not bare, too narrow, too deep, and bears don't scratch tents from the top. These marks started 7 feet up and dragged down to the tent's base. Lucas Brennan. Jake called. If you can hear us, respond. Nothing, just the wind and the oppressive silence of high altitude. We searched the immediate area, found his tracks leading away from camp, barefoot, walking steadily toward even higher elevation, toward areas that required technical climbing. But there were other tracks alongside his. Impossible tracks. 3-toed impressions, each toe showing a talon mark. The tracks were 12 inches long and showed a stride length suggesting something at least 8 feet tall. And they weren't following Lucas. They were walking beside him, like escorts, like guides leading him somewhere. We followed for 20 minutes before the tracks entered an area too technical to cross in darkness. We marked the location, called for daylight rescue team, and waited for dawn. Helicopter spotted Lucas at 0720 hours. He was at 13,500 feet, well above tree line, sitting on a rock outcrop in sub-zero wind chill, wearing only his sleeping clothes. No boots, no jacket. He should have been dead from exposure, but he was alive, conscious, and when they extracted him, he was smiling. Medical evaluation showed severe frostbite, mild hypothermia, but neurologically he tested normal, physically intact, but psychologically changed. He wouldn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, he described what happened. He'd been sleeping when he heard scratching on his tent, assumed it was wind or small animals. Then the breathing started, outside the tent. Slow, measured breaths from something large enough that each exhale moved the tent fabric. He'd looked through the mesh window and seen them. 3 figures, 8 to 9 feet tall. Humanoid but wrong, too thin, arms too long, covered in dark feathers that seemed to absorb light. Faces that were almost human, but with 2 large eyes positioned like owl's eyes, forward-facing for binocular vision. And wings, not like birds, more like bat wings, but massive, folding along their backs when not in use. They'd opened his tent, not unzipped it, just pulled the fabric apart like it wasn't there, and one had spoken, not in English, not in any language Lucas recognized. But he understood anyway. Come see, come understand, come to where we live. He'd followed, not compelled, invited. They'd walked him up the mountain, moving through terrain he couldn't have crossed safely in daylight, let alone in darkness. They'd taken him to a cave system at 13,500 feet that shouldn't exist based on geological surveys. And inside, he'd seen their home. There were dozens of them, he whispered to the psychiatrist, living in the high places. They showed me how they see, different spectrum, different dimension almost. And they told me why they only take solo campers. Because 2 people create a bond, a connection that anchors each other to human reality. One person alone at high elevation, mind already affected by thin air, that person could be shown things, taught things, invited to see the mountains the way they see them. He was released after 2 weeks of observation, diagnosed with altitude-induced psychosis. But 3 months later, he went back, hiked to 11,200 feet alone, set up camp in the exact same spot, left a note. They didn't hurt me. They showed me something beautiful. I want to see it again. Search team found his tent 3 days later. Empty. No tracks leading away this time. No sign of struggle. His boots were in the tent, neatly placed, like he'd taken them off to go somewhere he didn't need them. We've never found his body, but climbers at high elevation sometimes report seeing him, walking above 13,000 feet in light clothing that shouldn't be survivable, moving through terrain that should require technical gear, never alone, always accompanied by tall, dark figures that vanish when you look directly at them. Here's what I know that I can't put in official reports. The Nunnup are real. They live in caves and crevices above 13,000 feet. They hunt at night, targeting solo campers specifically because isolation and thin air make people vulnerable to seeing things normally invisible. They don't kill, they recruit, show you their world, their perspective, their way of existing in high places where humans struggle. And some people accept the invitation, choose to stay in that altered state where the mountains are more than just rock and ice, where the air is thin not because of pressure, but because you're existing slightly outside normal reality. Rangers work in pairs above 9,000 feet, not because of buddy system safety, though that's the official reason. We work in pairs because the Nunnup won't approach groups. They only invite solo individuals. And every ranger who's worked these mountains long enough has heard the wing sounds at night, seen the three-toed tracks, found the scratches on abandoned tents. Don't camp at elevation above 9,000 feet in the Rockies alone. Not because the thin air will kill you, though it might. Because at that elevation, you're in the territory of beings who hunt for consciousness, not meat, who take people not to eat but to transform, to show them perspectives that make returning to normal human existence impossible. Lucas Brennan isn't dead. He's just living in the high places now, existing in the spaces between human and Nunnup reality. And he's not alone up there. 6 others over the past decade have made the same choice, accepted the same invitation. Thin air does things to your brain, but the Nunnup do more. They show you that the thin air isn't a limitation. It's a doorway, and some people walk through that doorway and never come back. We tell you it's about altitude sickness, about judgment impairment and hypoxia risk, because that's easier than admitting the mountains have inhabitants who can only be seen when you're alone, vulnerable, and your mind is already altered by elevation. Rangers know. We see the evidence every season. And we never, ever camp alone above 9,000 feet, because we've seen what accepts the invitation. And we don't want to join them. Story number 3. Never follow ranger instructions written in trail registers. Trail registers serve a vital purpose. Sign in, sign out, leave emergency contact info. If something goes wrong, we know who to look for and where. Most parks maintain registers at trailheads, remote campsites, summit approaches. Hikers are encouraged to use them, but trail registers have a problem. They're accessible to anyone, including people who aren't rangers but can write convincing instructions, and including things that aren't people but have learned to imitate ranger handwriting, learned our terminology, learn how to give directions that sound official but lead somewhere no trail should go. We stopped using trail registers for official communications in 2019, after the incidents. But we can't tell hikers that. Can't say someone or something is leaving fake ranger messages that look absolutely legitimate, and following them gets people lost or worse. So registers still exist. We just don't write in them anymore. And we check them religiously, looking for the fake entries, trying to identify patterns. Trying to understand what's leaving messages designed to lure hikers into places they should never go. My name is Daniel Whitehorse, and I'm a ranger for Adirondack Park in New York. My grandfather was Mohawk, and he taught me about the trickster spirits who love causing humans to become lost. They study us, he'd say, learn our speech, our writing, our authority symbols. Then they use that knowledge to mislead. A message that looks official, sounds helpful, but takes you somewhere the forest wants you. September 2024. I was doing my weekly register check at Heart Lake Trailhead. Entrance to several trails, including approaches to Mount Marcy. Standard procedure. Read all entries. Look for discrepancies. Note any unusual patterns. Most entries were normal. Names, dates, intended routes, expected return times. But halfway through the register, I found one that made my blood run cold. Asterisk official park notice. Due to trail damage from recent storms, hikers attempting Mount Marcy summit should use alternate route. From Heart Lake, take Avalanche Pass Trail to Junction Marker 7, then proceed northwest on unmarked service road, not shown on commercial maps, for 2.3 miles. This route bypasses damaged sections and provides safer approach. Estimated time savings, 3 hours. Ranger J. Morrison, 09/15/24 *. Everything about it looked official. Proper format, ranger name and date, specific details. The kind of entry that would make hikers think they're getting insider information about a better route. Except, 1. We never leave route changes in trail registers. We use signage, website updates, and verbal warnings. 2. There's no Ranger J. Morrison in Adirondack Park. Never has been. 3. Junction Marker 7 doesn't exist on Avalanche Pass Trail. 4. There's no service road northwest of any junction on that trail. 5. The handwriting matched previous fake entries we've been tracking for 5 years. I immediately radioed dispatch. I've got another fake entry at Heart Lake Register. Suppose alternate route to Marcy Summit via non-existent service road. Need to check if anyone followed these instructions. 3 hours of investigation revealed that 4 hikers had signed in that morning with intentions to summit Marcy. 2 had returned safely using the normal route. 2 were still out. And according to hikers we interviewed, those 2, Chris and Amanda Hayes, a married couple from Vermont, had been seen reading the register very carefully before heading out. We mobilized search and rescue, followed Avalanche Pass Trail to where Junction Marker 7 would theoretically be, found fresh boot tracks leaving the marked trail, heading northwest into unmarked forest, followed them for 2.3 miles, the exact distance specified in the fake entry. The tracks led to an area I'd never accessed in 10 years of working these mountains. Dense forest that maps showed as impassable terrain. But there was a path. Old, overgrown, but definitely a path. Like someone or something maintained a route specifically for hikers following those fake instructions. We found Chris and Amanda at mile 2.4. They were standing in a small clearing, looking confused, checking their GPS. When they saw us, Amanda actually seemed annoyed. Thank God. We've been following the service road for hours, but the summit approach isn't where the ranger said it would be. Do you know if we took a wrong turn? There's no service road. I said carefully, there's no approved alternate route. Where did you get these directions? From the trail register. The ranger's note. Chris pulled out his phone. Show me a photo he'd taken of the fake entry. Ranger Morrison's instructions. So it would save 3 hours. There is no Ranger Morrison. That entry is fraudulent. Who else did you see after leaving the trail? They looked at each other, confused. Nobody. We've been completely alone. Well, except what? There was someone ahead of us on the path. We never caught up to them, but we could hear them. Footsteps, branches moving, like they were staying just out of sight, leading us deeper. We evacuated them immediately, got them back to the marked trail, back to safety. They were physically fine, no injuries, proper hydration, good gear, but psychologically shaken when they realized they'd been lured off trail by fake instructions and followed by something that stayed invisible while herding them deeper into isolated forest. Here's what makes this worse. We've been tracking these fake entries for 5 years. Always the same handwriting. Always specific route instructions to non-existent features. Always signed with names that sound like rangers but aren't. And always leading to areas of the park that are isolated, difficult to search, and have high concentrations of missing persons cases from previous decades. The entries started appearing after we digitized most of our communication systems. Like whatever's leaving them learned that registers were becoming obsolete for official use and saw an opportunity. Empty registers that hikers still trust, that look official, that provide perfect opportunity for misdirection. We've tried removing registers entirely. But hikers complained, said it was unsafe to not have sign-in capability. So we compromised, left the registers, but added notices that rangers never leave route instructions in them. But people don't read notices. They see handwriting that looks official and trust it. We caught 12 fake entries in the past 2 years, all following the same pattern. And we've rescued 8 hikers who followed those instructions. But we know there are more. People who followed the routes, got lost, and never made it back. People who are now part of the missing person statistics we attribute to natural causes. Fell, hypothermia, wildlife, when the truth is they were deliberately led into isolated areas by something that learned to write like rangers. What's leaving these messages? We don't know. No cameras have caught anyone writing in the registers between our checks. The handwriting is consistent across multiple locations miles apart, suggesting either a single entity covering huge territory or multiple entities using the same script. And the routes they specify always lead to areas with strange characteristics, dense forests that shouldn't be passable, clearings that don't show on satellite imagery, paths that seem to appear and disappear. My grandfather said the trickster spirits love written word because it carries authority humans automatically trust. A spoken warning can be questioned. Written instructions feel permanent, official, true. And when the writing mimics authority, ranger, doctor, official, humans follow without thinking. He was right. We've watched it happen. Hikers read the fake entries, check their maps, see that the specified features don't exist, but trust the written authority anyway. The ranger must know something I don't. The ranger has access to information I lack. That trust gets people led into places they should never go. Now we check registers daily during high season. Remove fake entries immediately. Try to intercept hikers before they follow the false instructions. But we can't be everywhere. Can't check every register every day. And whatever's leaving these messages knows our schedule, knows when we're not watching. Last month, we found an entry that terrified me more than any previous one. Asterisk official park notice. Ranger stations will be unmanned September 20th to 23rd due to training exercises. In emergency, proceed directly to rescue cache at coordinates 44.1827 degrees north, 73.9712 degrees west. Cache contains radio, first aid, emergency shelter. Chief Ranger Williams, 09/18/24 *. There is no Chief Ranger Williams. Those coordinates point to an area 40 miles from the nearest trail. And rescue cache isn't terminology we use, but it sounds so official, so helpful. Perfect bait for a hiker in distress who thinks they're being directed to emergency resources. We immediately added warnings to all registers, posted notice online, tried to prevent anyone from following those instructions. But on September 21st, a solo hiker named David Park went missing. His last known action was reading the Heart Lake register. His GPS showed he'd left the trail heading toward those coordinates. We found his GPS unit 3 days later, abandoned at mile 12 of his journey toward the fake cache location. No sign of David. No tracks beyond that point. Just his GPS. Still functional. Sitting on a rock like he deliberately left it behind. Never follow ranger instructions written in trail registers. Real rangers stopped using them after we realized something was learning our handwriting, our language, our authority. Something that understands humans trust written word more than spoken warning. Something that uses that trust to lead people away from safety. Trail registers are still there because removing them entirely caused problems. But they're monitored, checked, treated as potential security threats rather than communication tools. And every fake entry we find gets logged, analyzed, added to a pattern that's been building for 5 years. We can't tell the public the truth. Can't say an unknown entity or entities is leaving false official instructions designed to lure you into isolated areas. So we just say, rangers don't use registers for official communication anymore, and hope people listen. Most don't. They see official-looking handwriting and trust it, and some of them end up like David Park. Last seen heading toward coordinates that lead nowhere maps recognize, following instructions from a ranger who doesn't exist, trusting authority that was manufactured specifically to mislead them. The handwriting is getting better, more authentic, harder to distinguish from real ranger script. Like whatever's doing this is practicing, improving, learning to be more convincing. And the routes are getting more sophisticated, more plausible, harder to immediately identify as false until you've already started following them. Trail registers were supposed to keep hikers safe. Now they're potential death traps. Communication tools hijacked by something that learned to speak our language and write our instructions. Real rangers know. We check daily. We warn verbally. We remove fake entries as fast as we find them. But we can't be everywhere. And the fake entries keep appearing, perfectly formatted, completely convincing, leading to places no trail should go. If you see ranger instructions in a trail register, ignore them. report them. Don't follow them, because real rangers stopped writing in registers 5 years ago. And whatever's writing in them now isn't trying to help you. It's trying to lead you somewhere specific, somewhere isolated, somewhere you won't be found, somewhere the forest wants you,